know that sound? It is the Unfiltered Band. Another episode of Unfiltered coming your way. This right here, episode 75. You can jump on the Revolution at Casey Stern on Twitter, get in the Twitter bio, and hit the YouTube channel. And, of course, subscribe along the way and listen if you aren't already on Apple, Spotify, everywhere you get your podcasts. And thank you, Unfiltered Band. As I'm losing my voice, I'm getting all verklempt here because I'm reuniting with a longtime friend and one of the best people in the game. And a lot of experience during this time of year as we get, whether you're in meaningful September games or postseason push, he's been through it, and he's got pictures of it behind him. Hello, Ned. How are you, sir?
Hey, good, Case. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. So first of all, so for people who, wonder, what is it like after you don't have to write lineups on napkins and you don't have to have meetings and pre-series meetings and team meetings and all of it? Like, what are you doing, and how much are you enjoying your relaxation right now?
To be honest with you, I really enjoy it. And Case, there's a couple. There's a couple of. When I retired, we had lost 100 games, burnt out. So I was ready, to just sit and catch my breath. Were managers, wish they were still in the game, but interesting this time of year. But I don't feel a tug or a pull, to be a part of it. Somebody told me one time that when you retire, you better retire to something and not from something. I've got a 500-acre farm here that keeps me busy every single day. I do, and things that I like to do. So it's if I feel like doing something, I get up and do it. I'm up before the sun comes up, and then if I don't feel like doing it, I sit in the chair and write live.
How much people don't realize, and we've talked about this over the years, but you get 18 days off. You're away from your family for 6 months, because even when you're at home, you're locked in. You're going to games. You're at the ballpark early every day. How much more are you just like grateful for just even those odd random moments with the family where you're like, hey, if I was still doing this, and I loved it, but if I was still doing this, there's no chance I'd be able to have this hour to sit out on the porch or FaceTime the grandkids or any of that kind of stuff. How much are you enjoying just that aspect of it?
Oh, it's great. My grandkids are here every weekend. They come up just about every weekend. The interaction with them, we didn't, I'd get to see them once a year or time, because I would leave here the 1st of February and I wouldn't get home till the middle of October. Sometimes I wouldn't get home till November. So, you just had to kind of lock the door here at this place and forget about it and just go take care of your business. But, that's when I think she understood that, I only have so much RAM in my head to go to leading a baseball team. She was really, really good with her stuff that went along with the family. But, I think my boys all played baseball. My oldest, was a really, really good baseball player. And I got to see him play like twice, seniors, and ended up they were the national champions their junior year. And I didn't get to see a game, and state champ or backup runner-up state champions his senior year, and I got to see 2 games. That's when your life is involved with baseball.
There's a thing about managers who, like, if you manage a game, you manage every game. So a lot of them, you can't watch games sometimes afterwards immediately, because even contemporaries of yours, you're thinking, I would have done this, I would have done it, because it's just your nature. Does any of that still exist when you watch a game? Can you enjoy a game now, or are you not at that point yet?
No, I enjoy not watching games. I don't feel a tug to watch them, and I don't think I've watched in 2 innings at a time since I retired. And I'll watch, a couple of innings, and I'll try because I understand, a lot of the moves that you make are really well thought out. You may have a pitcher that it's his spot, and you put him in and he gives up 4 runs. I mean, it's just it doesn't. So I kind of came to terms with that early, but I don't really pay too much attention to baseball right now. I get up in the morning, I look at the MLB website. What's going on. I am intrigued with Albert Pujols and his run. I'm intrigued with Judge. What he's doing. I love watching the Mets and the Braves, their run and their competition together. And I'm impressed. To really get in and understand. I just read the top of the news and I'm gone. Too much going on. I just kind of check those highlights and move on.
Yeah, you mentioned the Mets and the Braves. I want to hit a bunch of things, but I want to start there because you and I both live down here. Obviously, I've got the hat on. My longtime love for this team, and the '90s when you were sitting there and you were on Bobby's staff. That was such a great time for that rivalry in this game. It was great for this sport. I'm so happy that it's back. I mean, all the angst between the fans and all of that, it's a little bit of a different tenor because, whereas like Bobby and Bobby may have, not been hanging out ever outside of the togetherness that everybody experienced the game after 9/11, there was real angst there. And, Snit is such a super nice guy and Buck's so well respected. It's a little different here. But
Yeah.
How good is it to see for somebody who saw that rivalry firsthand that now the Braves and the Mets are a thing again, fighting for a division?
I think it's phenomenal. I do. I just, go back on those times and, remember how much fun it was to go to New York and how much fun it was for New York. The games meant something. You woke up tingling, knowing that you're going to the park to play the Mets and back in those days with Maddox, Glavine, Smoltz, and Avery and those boys, you were going to kick their ass, and it was one of them good feelings, But it's just what they're doing back and forth and the run. I mean, the Braves were 10 games out at some point. They're neck and neck. So I just think that it's a real interesting, really Mets fan and a Braves fan.
You have such a tie to, and there's a number of cities, but because even certainly during your time, and I had a lot of success in Milwaukee, you had such a tie to Atlanta. When you think back to your relationship now with the city of Kansas City, which will live on way past either of us here on this earth, how soon after getting there did you realize that that was a city you could build a relationship like that with, Ned? Because clearly winning at the level you did, which we'll get into, has a large part of that. But was that a city that you knew well? Was it a city that you kind of had to talk to people and get a sense, hey, is this a place I want to be? Give me a sense of your first feel in the building of that relationship between you and the city of Kansas City.
Because I saw it firsthand when I played in the big leagues in the early 80s. Kansas, they had those great rivalries with the Yankees and George Brett, and they were, time you went into that city, it was a knowledgeable city about baseball. They were passionate about baseball, and the players, and I saw it firsthand back then. But when I went in there, of course, we had the organization had lost, a lot for people that were really kind of fed up with losing. They really wanted to turn around, and they were very impatient to do it, and trying to explain to them, look, this is going to be the pretty good players that, are going to be able to compete for a championship. They had heard it before, and they had Beltran and guys like that. And as soon as they get good, they ship them off. And so they were very, very cynical about betting. And it wasn't until, 2014, really at the, we made a push and ended up not making the playoffs, but we took it all before we got eliminated. So the next year, there started to be a little more, and it was finally generated there. Going into the last game, we were a game out. We didn't know if we were going for the division or be the wild card. So, it was a very, very tight race behind us 100%. But after that wild card game, it just went to a whole new level.
Yeah, obviously and I've said this to you many times over the years, but in covering it and being around you, the symmetry of an organization is so important. People don't pay attention to it enough. What you and your staff and Dayton and his staff and the connection that you guys had in, a common goal, but understanding how to communicate with each other. It's not an accident that both of you were. It's like the Bill Walsh tree with John Sherholz, right? So it's not accidental, or with Bobby Cox. How much did the two of you learn from that, and how much do you think that that was a huge key that both of you in different ways came from an organization down here in Atlanta that knew how to win?
I think that was important. Case, when you really sit down, I think the problem that you run going into Kansas City is the and people. I get the sense that fans think that if you don't win, and the problem that you run into is, and this is absolute truth, you won't ever. So when you don't have talent, it doesn't matter what you do, you're never going to win. Our fans, they don't see that. They want you to win. They don't care about your talent level. They don't care about talent. All they want to do is see you win. So when you kind of get there as a really talented group of players, and you have to get them to a point where and that generally takes from the time they get to the big leagues 2 to 2.5 years. And to be patient during that time is extremely difficult. So your skin can tune all that stuff out and try to keep the clubhouse insulated inside those guys to understand what their job is every single day. They've got talent, right? What's your job? And I would explain to them every so often, because they would push to be good sooner than they were ready to be good. And it was like, listen, here's the deal. Contract? And they would look at my head and they go, well, yeah, it's a contract. I said, say, well, I don't know. Okay, here's what your contract says. Your contract says, I pay you X amount of dollars for what? Does it say 40 home runs? Does it say 120 wins as a pitcher, 200 strikeouts, and ERA under 2, batting average of 300? It doesn't. Contract simply states that we will pay you X amount of dollars for your very best. That's it. So what I need you to do is to go out and get on that field, be prepared, be ready for your very best effort. Not only me, your teammates, the fans, your family. Give us your very best effort every day. It comes with that. If it's an 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts, if it's your best effort, you go home and you go to bed. If it's 4 guys, we're all happy. But that once they start to understand what their job is, they start to relax a little bit. They start to produce a little bit, and all of a sudden they start winning a little more. So you get to the point where, hey, you can compete. And there's a line. I mean, there's a line between developing. You get to that line where you're done developing, then it's time to compete. Boom. You're changing gears. The whole focus is a different focus. It's absolutely winning every day. You know why? Because you can't develop yourself to a point where you can compete, where you can be successful, and you can be productive. And, fans understand that. And, they say, well, we're tired of waiting. It's like virtue. They don't want to hear that. You have to have patience to be successful.
Yeah, well, it's so funny because, well, and Ned, I think the other thing is you had so many kids, right? So you're battling between, and I go to Moose specifically because I remember, you had, coaches that, were needing to be changed and replaced. Everybody's, getting on expectations of every player. And Moustakas seemed to be a guy already pinpointed, right? He gets sent down, he comes back, and you stuck with him. And, some of the other guys like Haas, they were having consistent success where it probably was a little bit easier. But how much Is that luck? How much of it is trust? I mean, tell me about the dynamic of that, because you got to be thinking as a human, well, geez, I need to get more out of this kid. But you don't know for sure that he's going to turn out to be a guy who could be a star in a postseason the way he was twice for you. How's that kind of whole thing work out behind the scenes?
I don't know, Case. I did know that if we just let this kid work through these issues, he played with such an edge, and it was he was so hard on himself where you knew if you could ever get him over that point that he was going to be good. Look, I kept telling Dayton one time, like I was nuts, but early on I'd say, look, we've got Escobar is going to be an all-star. Hosmer's going to be an all-star. Moose is going to be an all-star. I started naming these guys. Wade Davis, he's going to be an all-star. And he's going to what? We're going to have a whole team all-stars. Well, 15, you have 7 or 18. I don't know how I was able to do it, but I always could judge that talent. And once I judged that talent, and it was getting to know them, what makes them tick, their competition level, their ability to, all these things kind of, filtered into the equation. Felt that these kids were going to be special, and they all turned out to be special.
Last night, for the New York Mets, who are right there neck and neck with the Braves now, Terrence Gore's an unbelievably important base, and it was 8 years ago that he was doing that off John Lester for you, a wild game, and away you go with, I think it was Gordon, the big homer, and that whole run began. When you're sitting there down 7-3, I think it was, against a guy who is your pretty much your neighbor, here, for people who don't know, right? He lives right here.
Right.
And not only the person, the competitor, but this is one of the best big game pitchers of our time. And it would have been a successful season that if you lost that game, to say, hey, this is the next step, right? You still could have sold that. Take me back to what you're thinking in those moments, 7th inning down 7-3 to John Lester, and here comes Terrence Gore basically just running circles around the bases to get you started.
Yeah, that was more than, because I don't think we'd beaten John Lester in like 2 years. And then we get them out. It's the bottom of the 7th, and the guys run into the dugout. My mind's spinning. I'm looking at this, but I'm starting to hear a rumble in my ear down there, and it starts to get louder and louder and louder, to the point where it caught my attention, and I looked, had all those guys down there in the corner, the whole team, and Moose was screaming, and they were screaming, this guy's not going to beat us, not tonight. He's not going to do it. Let's go. He's not going to beat us. Let's go. That's not going to happen. Get on base. Get him over. Get him in. Let's go. He's okay, cool. They're fired up, right? They're still fired up. But all of a sudden, here we come. That inning, we ended up tying up the game. In the next inning, they take the lead. We tie it up. It's back all over, and we end up winning it in the 12th inning. You kind of revisit that moment, and not only do we win the wild card game, we win the next 7 games in a row. We sweep Anaheim in the American League at that point. We ended up sweeping the Baltimore Road, and you get back to that point, and I always said that, with a group of guys, and the turning point is when they're ready to compete, they think that they can win. But there's a point where it gets into their heart, where they know in their heart that they can win, and they know they're good. It's a difference between thinking and knowing. And that ball game is where that switch clicked, and those boys went from thinking they were good and made a huge run on it.
There are certain, and because you had them down here, In Atlanta, when you're coaching, you had it with Zach, with Greinke, and see some of those guys that you're. There are certain guys like Bumgarner where, you know, you don't say to yourself, well, hey, look, we can't beat the guy, clearly. But in the back of your mind that game is about, like, we can't let him get in the game. It matters,
Yeah.
right? And I think
Right.
I think you had Jay Guts, you had Guthrie, and I think it was Huddy, right? Who was on the other side, I believe.
In game
Yeah, in game 7. How much was that the feeling before? Nobody knew he would, because I say this, Ned, and not to bring up, you won the World Series in the next year, so I don't feel so sore bringing it up for you. But that's the best pitching performance I've ever seen in person. I mean, I've never in what that was, and I know in talking to Boach before the game, they really thought they could only get 3 innings out of him, and you're thinking maybe a fourth. He goes 5 and 2, whatever the hell it was. What was the thought process before that game when you knew Bumgarner was looming there?
before the game,
Yeah.
Listen. I think I've told you, but in game 5, we played game 5 in San Francisco and lost. Bumgarner shut us out, right? The 8th inning, he had like 105 pitches. So I'm thinking, send them back out, send them back. And at that time, I don't know, 2 or 3 or 4 to nothing. And send them back out. I want that pitch count way up. I don't want to see him again. So all of a sudden, here he comes back to the inning, throws 125 pitches. Well, in San Francisco, when you get done with the game, in order to do, you got to walk across the field because the tunnels are full of pedestrians and fans. So I walked across the field, and when I got into the giant dugout, Madison Bumgarner just finished, and it was, he turned around and walked away, and I said, "Hey, Madison." He turned around. He goes, "And I just want to tell you, that was an awesome game you threw today, man. I mean, that was tremendous. That Madison Bumgarner-esque." He goes, "Hey, man, I've seen all your hunting videos. Yeah, I sure, maybe one day we can go hunting together. How's that sound?" He goes, "Well, that sounds, I'd like it too." But anyway, congratulations. That was an awesome game. And then here it came out of my mouth. "I am sure again." All right? And then, so I wasn't expecting him in game 7. We've got our pitching matchup. We got Jeremy Guthrie. If we can get 3, we've got Wade Davis. We've got guys that we feel we can get.
Herrera, who you brought, I think you brought Herrera in the 4th, right? Is that
we
where
did?
You went
we
first,
brought
I think.
Herrera in the 4th, and Herrera was like 2-2 with 1 out, and I brought him in to face Michael Morse. With Herrera's fastball on 3rd, he can strike him out. Score tied 2-2. Hold it right there, and then I've got Wade for a couple. I've got Holland for a couple, and that my bullpen was so dynamic back then. A sacrifice fly to right field, and neither team scored again. But I wasn't really expecting when he came in. I'm like, okay, good. He threw 125 pitches. Let's get on. I mean, I was full. And we actually had a point when he first came in where we got a guy on. Haas hit a middle, I think that Panic dove for, flipped it to second, and I mean, he just barely caught it. It had been 1st and 3rd, and no telling what would have happened from that point. But when they sent him back out, and I'm not convinced. Even when Alex Gordon hit, that ball, and he kept going, he had to hold him up. Salvi was up. Salvi hit a home run off him in game 1. So I'm like, Salvi sees him good game, and when Salvi popped that game up, I mean, I was like, somebody hit me with a 1, 2, 3. I was so convinced we were going to win. But it was a historic performance by him, and anything than that, we'd have 2 World Series rings.
That's right. It was historic. Look, it's the best. Yeah. I mean, for all the Greg and Glav and some of these guys who have had, better overall career. Nobody put something like that out of the bullpen. Mussina had one with the Yankees. There've been some out of the bullpen that are nothing like that. That second year when you come in, the hunger, because you didn't win it the first time, right? Especially, is already set in place. I mean, so you don't have to kind of do any of that. Did the season feel longer to get to that kind of postseason push again because the guys kind of wanted to all start at the end in game 8, if you will? I mean, how does that happen? Because people don't talk about the human element of that. To me, it would be human element that I wouldn't not be able to. How do I take at bat by at bat when all I'm thinking is I got to get back there so we could start over and try and win the game this time?
It is a definitely careful for that, because I experienced that every single year in Atlanta. And we went to the playoffs every year. And once spring training started, I just wanted to get through the season to get stood. I'm like, damn, we got to go through this season to get there. We knew we were that good, and we knew that was just a drudge of going through 162 games. So I was prepared for that. I knew that we had to stay focused every single game because nobody was going to give us anything. And we did fairly easy until about the last series. And we had like a 13, 14 game lead. But we were bad record, which gave us home field advantage. And we were battling Toronto. I did not want to go to Toronto and have them home field advantage. Play four games in Toronto. And Jose Bautista and the Texas Rangers, all the stuff going on there. I mean, it was just crazy. The fans were crazy at that time. And I wanted 4 games in Toronto. But our guys wanted to make sure they were healthy. And they were ready to take like the last day or 2 off. And I mean, I was like, no, you cannot. We cannot feel the advantage. And they thought in their mind that they were so good, they didn't care if they had a home field advantage or not. They knew. So, we ended up winning on the last day home field advantage, which big deal for us.
When you get to that World Series, your team had it's funny because the game at that point, even though it's not that many years ago, Ned, there wasn't even the outrage that there is now and has been the last couple of years for people to have more contact at the plate. It wasn't as bad then. We'll talk about shifts here in a second, as it is now. And at the time, I think still everybody noticed that the best thing about what your lineup did was they got the bat on the ball. And with those guys that you were going to face, including DeGrom, who, by the way, now 7 years later has 86 strikeouts and 4 walks this year, which is pretty decent. He beats LA in game 5. You got the rookie thing. You got Harvey, you got Thor and all of that. How much was your approach in the World Series that you had kind of the exact type of an offense that would give this team trouble because you were going to at least put the ball in play and give it a chance to do something good for you offensively rather than all the swings and misses those 3 guys had gotten up to that point?
We knew that. We knew that opposing managers, we would drive them crazy because they tell me we can situations where we need a strike, we cannot. How did you get guys to do it? Now, it was just, Dale Swain was just drilled in their head. Look, when you face a good pitcher, the reason is let's get this pitch count up. Get the first good pitch that you can handle and hammer it somewhere. And that's what they did. A good pitch and putting it in play. And when you put it in play, good things happen. And it did. Our ability to put the ball in play was a huge advantage for us. Mets system, I'm looking at DeGrom, like, and Syndergaard and Max, who was, really good. I'm like, geez, man, this is going to be. Kept pushing for the Mets. When we were playing for Mets, and I'm like, have you seen their pitching staff? And he said, but have you looked at the schedule? And I said, no, I haven't looked at the schedule. What are you talking about? And he goes, the schedule next year. And he goes, we're going to play the Mets, and we're going to beat them. And we open up at home against the Mets. They're going to, and I'm thinking, like, oh, that's a of an omen. And sure enough, I mean, amazing. The feeling after, especially 14, we came so close. I mean, we had a lot of confidence. But when Alcides Escobar got up there and hit the first pitch for an inside
against
the park
Thor,
home
right
run,
after all that talk against
it
Syndicate.
was. I think it was Harvey the first night, then DeGrom, and then
Okay.
third night, and then Max.
The Cespedes play in the outfield, which I mean, he took a circuitous route to get to that ball.
Yeah, that's right. But after one pitch where I had 1-0, and I mean, it just it was really a very confident feeling at that time that we were going to be good, and no matter what, we were going to find ways to score runs and are shutting them down.
What's the most vivid memory you have from either winning it, after winning it? You could take me from after the last out all the way through the parade in that offseason. What's the first memory or two that come to mind for you?
Well, for me, Casey, it was really weird because said and done, I wasn't like jumping up and down and I didn't celebration. I had just felt a very strong sense. I just felt very good. We've been talking about this for our city for a long time, that we, the kids that could bring a championship to Kansas City, and we'd finally done it. And I remember the trophy, and the guys were going crazy in the locker room. I went in my office and sat down, and I looked up on my calendar, and we just looked at each other and smiled. And it was just a very strong. It wasn't. I had no idea what we had accomplished, but I felt good about that. When we got on the bus early, we spent the night. We didn't get out of the stadium. The Mets crew guys kicked us out at 5:00 in the morning. They had had enough. They said, "That's it, get out." Right? It's like, yeah, we're done. They're turning lights out, and like, okay, right. So we get on the bus. We go back to the hotel. Our flight leaves like at 11. So we got on the bus at 10:00. We had 2 planes, and we get on the plane, and I'm sitting on the plane, and my phone rang, and I looked at it, and the only 2 people I ever have call me with no caller ID are Joe Torre and Robin. I figured it was Joe Torre calling to congratulate me. So I answered the phone and said, "Hello, Yost," and I said, "This is Ned Yost." And he goes, "Will you please hold for a call from the President of the United States?" I guess so, right? Well, it was Barack Obama calling to invite us to the White House. I talked to him for like 10, 12 minutes, and that was the first time I realized, hey, we might have done something really. And and then when we got home, it was totally nuts. And then that's when I finally, where it caught me so off guard. And it was funny because last year, Braves won the World Series in Houston, and they flew back the next day. I called Brian Snicker, congratulated him, and I said, "Let me tell you something, pal." I said, "Your life just changed." And I said, "You're going to find out as a manager, it's not going to be the same as it was before, because now you're not just a manager. Now you're a winning manager. And that puts you to another level." And that was something I didn't really, but Bruce Bochy said at one time, I said, man, I didn't really expect all this. He goes, "Yeah, it's the gift that keeps on giving." So
I wanted to ask you. You mentioned Boch, so you guys both went out at the same time, right? At not that year, but obviously years later. And there are a lot of young managers, which it's important for the game, and I also, knowing them personally, a good people doc out in LA and Booney and some of the guys who have come in. But there is a generation still of guys right in your realm that were contemporaries of yours that are still kicking at such a high level, when Tito continuing to do what he does, and that team's in first place again. And Buck now with the Mets, and Snit, who you mentioned, a lifer in this sport. Dusty's got the Astros primed to maybe kind of have him have that moment to kind of, cap his. How good do you feel for the manager fraternity, that in all the new stuff the game has brought, that there are 4 of a bunch of guys I just mentioned who got their teams primed to go win a World Series, who are right there, your contemporaries, not the guys who you managed once and now have come up and been the new guy, like Counts, who we love, obviously, in Milwaukee, for example.
Right. Case, I don't think people understand of adapting that they had to do to get to this point. Because when we were young and we played, the game was totally different in the way that acted with your manager and your coaches and the things that were expected from you as it's a whole new generation of player now. In order to get through to them and to stay tuned in, you have to adapt, because they're going to get to the point where they're going to tune you out, they're going to push you out. You have to be able to understand. And I thought Joe Girardi was one of the smartest managers in the game, but that just always never really seemed to be there, even though he's and has a great baseball mind. You have to be able to adapt of today's player. They grew up different. Their lives are totally different than we grew up, and you have to be able to adapt, and you got to kind of give back a little bit and be able to be a much better communicator than our managers were with us. They know what's going on. They want the truth, and there's a lot to it. There's a lot of adaptation in order for them to maintain their success, and for that, I kind of take my hat off. And I know it's hard. You hear the old adage, you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, yeah. These old dogs have learned new tricks. Successful. That's why they've got players that are playing their hearts out for them, is because they've got today's player and today's system of play, and that's a big.
I want to hit you one more, excuse me, before we wrap, because you saw, and you're managing as the game, we mentioned, look, it changes a million ways, but the shift comes in, right? Fielders don't like it. Hitters hate it even more, especially if they're left-handed. Everybody's got to deal with it. Nobody's sure what to do. Is it paralysis by analysis? How do you use the information that you have? Did you think, now that we know that beginning next year the shift is gone and you're going to have 2 guys on each side, did you think when it first came in that, hey, eventually the hitters will figure out how to beat this as a league? Or are you maybe on the other side not surprised that the league had to step in to get rid of it because it didn't seem like the hitters were going to, as a group, do enough to stop it from happening?
From the onset, let's get rid of this, because you look at where the game had gone. Definite advantage for teams, especially some guys that pulled. All of a sudden, you look now. All of a sudden, singles are gone. So when you lose singles, you start to lose strategy. You lose steal. You lose the hit and run. So it's just a sit back and swing game. I think that players would adapt. The best player that I saw adapt was Mike Moustakas. And he got to the point where he got so sick and tired of hitting into that shift, he started hitting the ball all the other way. And he it paid for him. One time I put the shift on Albert Pujols, right? And Albert looked at the shift and had everybody pulled over to the pull like this, like, what are you doing? All right? So he got in the box, and being Albert Pujols at this 12 years ago, boom, he rips a base hit on the ground to right field. So it's like he's showing, you shift me, I'm just going to take my right? So we get up again, and all of a sudden I shift again. Albert, I love it when you hit singles. You are a home run hill every time. And then he quit. He went back to being Albert Pujols. I figured the psyche of the hitter wouldn't change that much, and it's overdue. I think it needed to be gone. I think it's going to create more offense. Hopefully, it's going to create, we'll just see more action in the game.
Ned, I can't thank you enough for doing this, man. It's so good to catch up with you. You know I love you, and keep enjoying that serene life, sitting out there and enjoying the weather. Which to me, I mean, you live in Atlanta much more than I have the last 8 years, but this is the best weather. September for me is my favorite month here. I mean, this is when the weather is at its finest. So kick your feet up and enjoy yourself, man.
We do, and I'm with you. September, October, my favorite time of year. I absolutely love it. But it's just a special place to be. But
get some Casper hot dogs. Are you still eating a lot of hot dogs, or are you down on the hot dog intake?
Look, that's a real sore subject to bring up right now, because I go and I order about 25 pounds or 30 pounds of Casper's hot dogs, and I eat them all, right? Well, I call them. They're not shipping them out anymore because fuel prices are too high. Delivery, so they're not shipping them anymore. They said maybe next year. So trying to figure out how I'm going to get Casper's hot dogs.
What are you going to do? You're going to have somebody go out there and grab them for you. You can't DoorDash all the way from. Where are they made? Where are Casper?
California. They're made in.
That's the long trip, Ned.
But I got a brother in California, but again, UPS doesn't guarantee. They make you, but they don't guarantee second day air, and you'll get them 4 and 5 days later, and by then they're
not good. You can't. Yeah, so they're not good.
You kind of in a catch-22. So I'm just going to have to. I'm going to withdraw for this winter, and hopefully make it through it.
I appreciate you, man. I appreciate this. I'll hop back in. We'll do this again. And you can stay on board the Unfiltered Revolution at Casey Stern. Listen everywhere you get your podcasts, Apple, Spotify, and elsewhere. Episode 75.